All right, welcome back to the Always Bayern Chelsea podcast. We got a special episode today. I am by myself out of the ABC crew, but I'm joined by a special guest today. We got Nick from Clean Sheet, which is a Premier League newsletter, a blog that he runs. And we're going to be talking about the Premier League today, as well as a few other topics. So, Nick, good to see you, and feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, and really appreciate the opportunity to chat. Um, yeah, it's Nick, and I run a blog, like you said. It's called the Clean Sheet EPL, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into it. But I am recently retired from a 32-year consulting career with Fortune 500 companies, and needed something light to and creative to keep me going. Started this newsletter, and we're in just starting year two.
Awesome, yeah. And I've been a subscriber of the newsletter for the last year-ish, year plus. To explain our connection, we are both involved in a Premier League pool, which is awesome, bringing a bunch of people together to kind of pick teams to win each week, and it's pretty awesome to get guys together. We met earlier this year for the first week, which was great, which we both posted about. So, I guess a little more background for you, if you want to say who you're a fan of and how you got into the Premier League, whenever you
Yeah,
did.
yeah, for sure. And I'll try to keep it real quick and short. But I was traveling to Europe quite a bit about 20 years ago for my work, and I was in Turin, Italy, and I was working with the Fiat organization. And some people might know the family that started the Fiat organization, who also started Juventus. I was there for the first time with my Italian colleagues, waiting to have a meeting at Fiat, and I had no clue who Juventus was. Everybody was talking about soccer. They were in the Champions League. They were playing for a European title, and I had no clue. They asked if I knew Juventus. I asked where they were from. Ironically, they were probably less than a mile or a kilometer away from where I was sitting, and I had no clue. And then they said, "Well, you really should know Juventus because people in this meeting are gonna, they're part of that group." And I just felt really out of it. And so I committed myself to that's the last time I'm going to get surprised on something like that. Because honestly, I grew up a big sports fan. I played sports, I rooted for sports in the United States, but it was traditional US sports, really. And it wasn't even really soccer. My high school team didn't even have a soccer team. So I committed myself to learning more about European football, soccer, and then fast forward to probably 15 years ago, and I was in England, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to read up on all this. I've now understand how the systems work, pro and relegation. I get all of that, and I started having conversations with people in London and in Brussels, Belgium. I was in the Netherlands and The Hague, and I could talk their shop, and it really made connections work wise. And what I didn't have was one team that was my team. But then when I was in England about 7 or 8 years ago, I kind of took a liking to Leicester City. The people that I knew there reminded me of my NFL team, the Green Bay Packers, a little bit, kind of a smaller town, kind of gritty in the middle of the country. I liked what I was hearing from the ownership. And I liked, honestly, that it wasn't one of the big six clubs that I would just jump on the bandwagon with. And so I became a Leicester City fan, and it just so happened a year later they surprised and shocked everybody and won the whole thing. Jamie Vardy's a blast to watch. Captain Morgan was a great, way to think about how all that worked. And then, I will say I get a little impartial to Liverpool. And I think part of that is now that I've learned a lot more, I love the collegial atmosphere there. I've had an opportunity. I worked with a lot of people who are Reds fans, and maybe as we'll talk a little bit about, because I didn't grow up in England or in Europe and have one team that I'm tied to for family reasons or location reasons, I take a little bit of leeway. I really gravitate towards clubs and managers, and I can really get on board with a high energy, passionate manager who's doing things the right way. And for me, over the last many years, it's been Klopp. I think it's been fun to watch him, and others as well. But that's really kind of how my fandom, I guess, would be called. For the clean sheet, I'm neutral, and hopefully, people recognize that. I try not to, at least, I try to be very unbiased in that.
Yeah, I'd say you're pretty unbiased. I mean, there's some jabs at Chelsea here and there,
Yeah,
but that's probably to be expected, which we'll discuss in a bit here about Chelsea specifically. But that's great. I mean, you mentioned the connections with people across the world too. I mean, what I've noticed from going over to Europe, I was just there for the first time this year, and even traveling in the United States. I mean, once you meet somebody, a stranger, you happen to find out that they're also a fan of whether it's a EPL team or one of the top five European League teams. It's awesome and it's an easy connection to make with people. I mean, I was literally in San Francisco about a month ago, and I ended up talking to this Australian guy for 20 minutes straight just because we both happen to be fans of the Premier League. So that's just great that you can have that connection with people.
by the way, I know you say I joke about Chelsea. Some of it's because I know several people who are subscribers who are Chelsea fans, so it's a little bit of fun to poke. I would also say, though, the very first match I ever went to in England was at Bridge, and I saw Chelsea take on Wolves. I actually have my scarf from the event up there hanging.
Oh, perfect.
So it's not that I have teams I dislike. Um, I yes, I have some favorites, but I just really enjoy I really enjoy the league.
Yeah, great league. And I mean, the banter is a great part of it too. I mean,
Yeah.
in our chat that we have for our pool, I certainly like to poke my nose and poke the bear into some of the other fans of teams. So, yeah, it's great. And speaking of the EPL, we might as well start talking about it a little bit.
You bet.
It has started. Obviously, we know that it's a few weeks in. But I think we can still kind of preview what to expect for the coming season now that the transfer window is over and we kind of have a clear look of what some of these teams will look like. I'm super excited to see how things play out this season in the Premier League. What are your thoughts and what are you looking forward to most about the upcoming season?
Yeah, I am looking forward to. Well, there's so many things really, but that things that jump off is can Slot replace Klopp? There's so much talent there and experience, and it sure is a good start for him so far. But I'm curious how that plays out. We've talked Chelsea. As a Leicester fan, I'm very familiar with Enzo, and it was disappointing to see him head over to Chelsea. I'm curious to see how the whole Todd Bowley experiment and the I'll call it the influx of players that they've had, how that's going to come together, and if they can. I was last year following that pretty closely with Pochettino, and yeah, I like Poch a lot. I liked what he did at Tottenham, um, and I kind of really didn't follow him too much at PSG, but it was impressive that he took Chelsea last year from where they started to how they were finishing the season. So it was, a big surprise that they lost the continuity when he left. So I'm really interested in how quickly can they come together, because it's obvious the talent's there. The second half they had in the second, I mean that was unbelievable. It's there. So I think that's interesting. I'm also in a macro level kind of watching what's going to happen with the recently promoted teams. Yes, Leicester's in there, so obviously I have a vested interest. But I think it's interesting that last year was only the second time in the history since the Premier League formed in the early '90s that all three teams were sent right back down. And I have to wonder, given the way financial fair play is structured these days, and it seems like teams that have been in the Premier League for a while and have the financial resources and can count revenue in a more direct way to their 3-year financial fair play window. That's such an advantage over a championship side that maybe has been in the championship for a year or two or more and then gets promoted back up to the Premier League. Fulham, prior to the last 2 years, went up and down and up and down like a yo-yo from Premier League to the championship, and it just seemed easier to do that. It seems like it's more difficult. Last year, the three teams, quite honestly, if any of them would have performed at a reasonable level, it would have been very possible for a Forest or a Everton to go down. But so macro level, I'm just interested to see how that plays out and if these teams can perform this year. And I guess who isn't? I'm just curious how City keeps doing it. It's unbelievably impressive to go four in a row, and it sure seems like they've got the motivation to push for it. I do question. I think Pep really wants to win the Champions League this summer, or I should say this next summer or at the end of this season. And the question I would have is, are they going to have the energy and the focus to go through the full season, really focus the resources on the Champions League, and then maintain their Premier League standing? So those are a couple things.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the long season. There's been talk about that already. I just saw the other day, De Bruyne was talking about how long the season is. Teams like City and even Chelsea have this new Club World Cup FIFA event at the end of the year after the
Yeah.
league's over. That's kind of part of this season. So, I mean, Chelsea, for example, could play upwards of 70 or 80 games just this season alone. So
Yeah.
that'll be something interesting to watch. We mentioned City. My question to you would be, who do you think can challenge City at the top? All right, so this is your original prediction that you had for all 20 positions for the Premier League. Specifically here, looking at top four, my question would have been, who do you think can challenge City? Clearly looks like at least a few weeks ago you thought three teams would finish above City.
Yeah. And in fact, if you go to the clean sheet, you'll see that I call them guesses because at the beginning of the season, I don't really know how you do it. But especially when, in one thing that's so interesting about European soccer is having the transfer window open after the season starts, and then you get a whole middle season transfer window. So things can definitely change and get adjusted. I guess the thinking was the following. Pep's going to go after the Champions League. 5 in a row. I thought 4 in a row was amazing. The odds are, if you will, even though I know that's not how it works, they're going to run out of gas in the Premier League. And I feel like an Arsenal and a Liverpool, even though they're also playing in the Champions League, will divert or focus their energies on winning the Premier League. Yeah, they want to win everything, right? But we all know when the season gets that long and with the extra games and the new structure of the Champions League this year, I just think they're going to be focused on it, and they have the talent to do it. I mean, if you look at City winning the last several years, yes, they've had a year or two in there where truly dominant, but last year they won by 2 points, but before that it was close. And it only takes one match, potentially somewhere along the line that can cost you the Premier League title. So, I thought Arsenal and Liverpool had the best chance. I just feel like the switch to slot, I thought it might take some time. Sure doesn't seem like that's the case so far. I don't think they
Yeah.
have as much depth, but, they might. I just felt like Arsenal had the depth, made some changes, improved the club. And, I think Arteta's a good manager, and I think they're 100% focused on it. Now, obviously, that Brighton draw a week ago, that let one get away maybe at home, but Brighton might be a pretty darn good team right now too. So it maybe is not as a devastating blow, if you will, if you can even say that 3 games into a 38 game grind. I threw Spurs in there partly because, well, not even partly. If you look at Ange, that guy has won everywhere he's gone, especially in year two. Sonny's great. They've got lots of. I mean, I like the style of play they have. They again maybe another little bit disappointing start because they seem to be having the road woes that they've had in the past, and if they don't get that figured out, they're gonna have to fight even for a European spot. But I thought that really that Tottenham in the three spot is a gaffer pick. That's on Ange. I like the way he does it. And if you were to scroll down even just a little bit, some of the reasons why, when you look at, um, let's say Aston Villa or you know, you've got Villa and Chelsea playing in Europe, um, and you've got there's just going to be the opportunity for teams to get distracted, and the teams that don't have depth, I think, are going to struggle. Um, I think I mentioned before, Chelsea to me was the hardest one to pick because I actually think they have the talent to win the whole thing. I
I would
also
agree.
feel like I also feel like they have the ability to finish out of the top 10. And I'm pretty sure Chelsea fans would kind of scoff at that, and maybe rightly so. But the negative scenario for Chelsea is they Enzo struggles to get the team to play, kind of like Poch did last year. Um, there gets to be some infighting. They don't really have the um, the leadership of guys who are Chelsea guys. I mean, I think I read where when Chelsea was on their great run 3 years ago, they have zero players on the squad from that run today. And so if the wheels were to even start to come off a little bit 10 games into the season and Bowley and company decide Enzo's the wrong guy and make a switch, it could be a while. So I don't think that's going to happen, but it comes to mind, and that's why I consider Chelsea to be really difficult to place. Because boy, the way they looked in the second half, like I said earlier this year, and the talent they have, um, they could really make a run. So I don't know where they're going to fit, but I just kind of placed them eighth when I looked at Newcastle not having to play in Europe. I put Man United higher because I looked at it as it's do or die for Eric Ten Hag and the club, and I actually thought, and I still do. I think they're a better team, and they're actually playing better. Um, but yeah, that was some of the thinking behind it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and Chelsea is tough, and we might as well just talk Chelsea a little bit further now, as it is relevant to the podcast. And as you mentioned, I mean, they have a lot of talent, new manager that you're bringing in. I think they're going to give Enzo more time, compared to Poch. I think they're going to start a little bit hotter. They have 4 points right now, kind of middle of the road, 11th. But they've shown signs already that they can be an exciting team, especially on the attack. So it'll be interesting to watch for sure. I guess speaking about Enzo, and you probably watched a lot of Leicester last season. Give us some thoughts on the type of manager that he is, what you think he can bring to a big club like Chelsea, obviously making a step up, if you will, from Leicester.
Yeah, sure. So, and first of all, I'll caveat the whole thing with if you were to be a subscriber of the Clean Sheet and read a bunch of it, I would describe it as a soccer publication, a European football publication for what I would call non-diehard soccer fans, right? I'll call it a little more of an introduction. I say because I think there's so many people that I worked with and so many people that I talk to about soccer in the United States just don't have the level of depth that somebody maybe who is part of the uh, your podcast, your Bayern Chelsea fan, or if you're a specific fan of one team and you have been for a really long time. So my viewpoints usually are, I'll call it broader, macro level, bigger picture, and simpler. That being said, the way I would describe Enzo, um, he's a guy that comes from a good pedigree. He's got the background for it. He's a little unproven. He I think he likes to play the way he likes to play, which I would kind of describe. He's a pep guy, right? So they want to be front foot, play out of the back. And I think the players at Leicester, he had the players to do that. And I think he's the kind of manager that tries a little more to fit the players to his approach. Um, Again, my opinion. I don't have any detailed facts on that, but that I took a little bit of that last year. I mean, he's a high energy guy. He handles the media well. He's Leicester struggled 3/4 of the way last season. I wouldn't say they limped home, but they did win the league pretty early on. But they were so hot early on. Um, I think if I were in Chelsea's situation and I'm thinking of Enzo, I would take a swing with him too. I think you being Chelsea have enough players that you're going to be able to play that he wants to play. I think it's the way fans want to see a team play these days. I think he's definitely got the connections. He's smart enough to do it. The question is, my biggest question, I guess, for him, and I saw a little bit of this at Leicester maybe last year, is things just went so well. You really didn't. He never really was challenged as a manager to fight through adversity, even
Right.
when they got 3/4 of the way through the season and were struggling a little bit. They still had an 8-point lead on the others, and then it got a little tighter. But he never really had to be challenged for what he was doing. And I think he's going to be under a spotlight and a microscope at Chelsea. And how does he handle? How I think he'll be totally fine with it. But as I think we're all probably aware, you get into those big six clubs, and it's just a different animal.
Totally. One of the things you mentioned that he's good with the media, that's something I've noticed right from the jump. I think the way he is confident, sticks to his guns, just the way he talks so honestly and transparently, I think is great with the media. So I really like that about him. It's interesting because the way Chelsea's structured, it's kind of come under some scrutiny, especially lately. If you've been following what's been going on with the ownership, just a lot of rifts going on, which I won't go into detail now about that, but it'll be interesting to see how that potentially affects the way he makes decisions and has input on certain things. I think if they continue to win and rise up, all that kind of goes away. When you're a winning club, you don't have as much distraction and all these other things going on. Whereas when you're a middle of the road club, then all that other stuff kind of continues to bubble up. So that'll be something to watch. As I do talk about the ownership, I am interested in your perspective, kind of as a neutral Premier League
Mm-hmm.
fan, just your brief thoughts on maybe the job a little bit that you think the new ownership has done, Blue Co. Maybe some thoughts quickly, if you've seen the rift between Bailey now and Clear Lake Capital, kind of the main majority ownership group that's been at Chelsea here.
Yeah, so I guess I would say it this way. I can see it working. I can see it not working. I think I get what they're trying to do. Um, and my neutral side would say I'm curious to see if you know if you sign all these players, spend all this money, treat it like truly like an appreciating or depreciating asset, players as that, and you literally are trying to bring in as many talented people as you think you can, with the idea that you're not going to play them all, and you'll sell them, and you'll try to make some money on those sales, and then you'll hit on the ones that you want. It's an interesting way to run the program. I mean, it's kind of like in the NFL, like a New England Patriots getting rid of good players and accumulating a lot of draft picks, and they're trying to hit on the next couple of great players that are going to carry the club, but you're going to miss on a lot, and it's going to bother people that you miss on a lot. But if you're able to develop players in your own club, which you can sell, which you don't think are going to be the superstar players. I think of a Conor Gallagher. I mean, that was it disappointing to see him leave Chelsea? Sure. Is he a good player? Sure. But if I remember this right, like I'm assuming, I think they came out in the positive in terms of the sale, and
Oh, totally.
so yeah, so it covers for the other, I'll call it, younger guys that you're bringing in that are unproven, so that you can try to hit a home run somewhere. So I think it's very much one way. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's a way to do it. What I worry about is for Chelsea, and what I'm not sure I like about the ownership group overall and how they're handling things is, maybe I'm more conservative, but I don't like the roller coaster ride that will be a club that just does not have consistency in an identity that I can tie my emotions to and root for. Because it's, if you look, and granted, maybe it's unfair to say Liverpool and City or even Arsenal, because obviously they've had some wonderful success, but you kind of have a feel for what the club's trying to do, what the personality of the club is, how the manager ties it together, and you develop quite a emotional reaction to what you're watching and being a part of. And at Chelsea, it's I'm sure there are a lot of Conor Gallagher fans out there rooting for the guy. Well, he's gone. I'm sure there are a lot of Sterling fans. Well, he's gone. I'm sure there's a lot of, it's a little bit like college sports these days with NIL. Just when you start to like a player, they leave for quote unquote greener pastures, and now you have three players to come in to try to replace them. You just lose the continuity. And as a fan, it's easier to get frustrated faster. And I also think as a player, um, it I gotta think the players at Chelsea feel more like today than ever that, man, this is just a business. Like, I'm not a part of the culture at Chelsea. I'm just playing for a club that is paying me a lot of money. I'm happy to be here, but there just seems to be maybe a disconnect, in the passion that's in the connectivity you get between a manager, a club, their fans, the history of the club, and I so I get what they're trying to do. My concern would be that it's going to be, um, even if they get wins, anytime they start losing, there's just going to be such a lack of connection that there's going to be more negativity than positivity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the strategy will work over time. It's similar to what a lot of teams in America are doing in American sports, where
Yeah,
you look at it and you do say, yeah, it's maybe too much of a business, whether right or wrong. You got Todd Bailey coming from his experience running the Dodgers. They've had a ton of success. They have
yeah,
amazing depth with young players, and they also buy the best talent at the same time. So a mix of both, which is clear Chelsea is trying to do. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future here, and hopefully things get better sooner than later. But I do want a quick pivot, as I think we probably have, a few minutes here in our Zoom
I,
meeting. But I do have to ask you, as it is an Always Bayern Chelsea podcast, if you have any thoughts on Bayern Munich, whether it's this season or what you've seen over them the last, 10, 15 years in their history. Thoughts on the Bundesliga a little bit if you watch any of the other
Yep.
leagues at all, and yeah, just some general
Yep.
thoughts on you.
I do. I mean, I definitely pay attention to the Bundesliga. My heritage, my grandparents came over from Germany. My last name is Lochner. It's lots of Southern Bavaria, Germany heritage and background. Love a good Oktoberfest. I would say, I follow Bayern pretty closely. I've always liked the club. Um, I I have yet to get to Dortmund. I'd love to go be a part of the Yellow Wall. I'm excited for the fact that there more and more games are being broadcast in the U.S. So I do pay attention and I do watch on occasion. Um, I think it's interesting with Bayern. Um, it definitely seems like such a, and again, macro level, not in the weeds there, but it does seem like a pivotal situation for Bayern this year because, I mean, shoot, they've dominated for so long. It was just, they were going to win the league every year. It was a question of how were they going to do in the Champions League. Mueller, fun to watch, but long in the teeth, and at the end of his career, you got Harry Kane coming in who wants to win trophies, and the jury's still out on why teams don't seem to win with Harry Kane, even though he scores a ton of goals, and you feel like you'd love to have him on your team. Um, I they still have the resources. But it's interesting when you look at Leverkusen or you look at Dortmund or that they're they're just fun to watch, and suddenly they feel like they can challenge Bayern. So it's that's what I'm macro level watching for again this year is you know is the dynasty over, so to speak, quote unquote, and the way that German football, the Bundesliga, is set up now allows for teams to challenge more consistently because they're going to kind of like in the Premier League, they're going to be in the top couple of teams just based on the resources they have and the history they have. But the question is, are they going to run off another 5 or 10 league titles again, and cups, or are they going to really have to fight for it all and challenge? And so I think that's real fun to watch. But I root for Bayern, but I root for. If you ask me, do I root for a specific club across Europe anywhere or not? I root for close title races at the end of the season and close relegation battles at the end of the season. And I root for good stories. Leverkusen last year was awesome, seeing how many games they could win in a row and suddenly and not only win in a row, but then score in the final minutes of games. So, yeah, it'll be fun to watch this year.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the best parts of these European leagues is the promotion relegation battle. One of the cool things, one of the cool stories in the world is Wrexham, obviously. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on in soccer. Real quick, once again, if
Yep.
you want to just plug your blog, Clean Sheet again, where people can find you and how
Yeah,
they
for
can
sure.
subscribe.
Yep. So real quick, it's a European soccer newsletter. It's called Clean Sheet EPL, CSEPL. It's really focused more on England and the English Premier League. However, there is a off island, quote unquote, off island section where we get into European soccer. And as I said, it's more macro level. It's focused on not just deep dives into specific soccer clubs. The best way to find it, we're out on X. You can find us at Clean Sheet EPL. You can go directly to sign up at it's cleansheetepl.beehive beehiiv.com.
All right, perfect. Well, really appreciate you joining me here for this episode. And like I said, we'll post a link, and I'm sure we'll probably get together in the future and watch
Hey
some
Jim,
some soccer.
one more thing, just real quick. I know we're going to run out of time. It's twice a week. Usually comes out on Thursday, on Friday, Tuesday. So, but thanks
Perfect.
again for having me, Jim. I really, really appreciate it and enjoy your podcast.
Yeah, of course. Great talking with you.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.